and welcome to Otago University Vote Chat 2014. This is a series of conversations we're having in the media production studio at the University of Otago in front of a live audience about election issues using visiting politicians and political commentators, and we are not just doing this over the internet. Of course, welcome if you're joining us on the New Zealand Herald website or on the University of Otago website. We're also doing this on Twitter, trying to be engaged in that way. We've got someone live tweeting it, so I'll hand you over to Liam to tell us about that.
Thanks, Bryce. For those who don't know how this works, I'm going to be live tweeting all the yarns between Bryce and Winston Peters today. So if you have any comments, concerns or reactions to anything that's said, you can use our Twitter handle @OUVoteChat or our hashtag VoteChat14.
Great. Okay, thanks, Liam. Okay, so today we've got someone who I just learned a few minutes ago is the person that's been on the cover of the Listener magazine more than any other politician, more than Helen Clark, more than David Lange, John Key, anyone. It's the leader of New Zealand First, Winston Peters. Welcome, Mr. Peters.
Thank you.
Okay, so what brings you down to Dunedin?
I was asked to come down here for do a public meeting, which we're doing tomorrow at the Otago at 2 o'clock. So that was very important for us, and other functions as well, including the 100-year celebration of the Dunedin Rugby Club tomorrow night.
Okay.
Obviously seeing this show today and other...
And the Highlanders, the other rugby game?
And the Highlanders tonight, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's called return on investment. If you're going to get on a plane, pack it with activity, make it worthwhile.
Okay, but the royal visit coincides with your visit too. Are they following you? Are you going to see them on Sunday?
Well, this was arranged before the royal visit.
Oh, okay.
So I'm carrying on my program.
Okay, so it's no snub to the royals.
No, it's not a snub to the royals, but I don't think they're going to miss me trying to get in a photograph and kiss baby George and all that sort of unseemly, indecent stuff that I'm watching at the moment.
Okay, so...
I don't think baby George is going to miss me.
Okay, so because you didn't go to the event the other night at the Government House, did you?
No, I didn't either.
No, so is that a decision to keep away from what the royals are doing?
Well, I think the monarchy is actually cheaper than a republic, and that's why I think why change what's still working. But the reality is, I don't think it's right to hold this sort of thing in election year.
Okay.
I don't think I think next year or last year should have been the case, but not using it, and I've seen that before when Muldoon did it. Way back in '81, where he said we're going to have a royal tour and a Springbok tour. How do you think that's going to go?
Okay.
So I've seen that before, and I don't like it, and so I'm just quietly getting on, not being fussed to be part of the process.
Okay. Nonetheless, politics comes into a royal tour, and people are starting to talk about republicanism and whether we should shift to a republic. What do you think? Are you a monarchist or a royalist or a republican?
I look at the economy of things, and I think that we've got 51, 52 countries on a good day that belong to the Commonwealth. And if you're going for a vote in the United Nations, you're almost halfway to getting half the vote if you've got this organisation work with you. And so why break up with old friends? But I would recognise that others might have a different view. I don't want politicians to decide this. I think we're not qualified in any way, shape or form. If we're going to have a change, then let's put it to the public after a 2-year debate.
So like a binding referendum? Or?
A binding referendum. Now, we've got to be bound to commit ourselves to a binding referendum. But I'd rather New Zealanders decide this and not politicians.
So, of course, the fishhook would be how would need a head of state that wouldn't be a royal. What sort of process would we use? Would we elect one or would we appoint one by the government?
Well, as Shakespeare wrote, there's the rub.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to change, and then when they're asked, as Australia was asked, yeah, but what to? Yeah. They start to get rather nervous about the outcomes. So because all sorts of possibilities present themselves from a real president to a powerless president.
How do you like the sound of President Peters?
I don't.
I mean, you must have some idea about some other.
You know what I think about the baubles of office. I've made it very clear over a long career.
So you wouldn't put your hand up for being New Zealand's first head of state?
Most certainly not.
Yeah?
No, I like real jobs where you're in the centre of the action, where it's exciting, where you get a chance to change things dramatically, and not just sort of posing and filling positions, which happens a lot in politics.
Okay. So let's get on to New Zealand First, your party that's been around nearly 21 years coming up in July.
21 years in July.
So is it going to be a big party?
Yes, going to have a big splash. Invite you guys along so you can all genuinely celebrate.
Okay, so what are the achievements of New Zealand First in 21 years?
Well, for a start, we started a new party protesting at the way government happened. And remember, before New Zealand First started, the people who were forming New Zealand First were out there demolishing the unsoundness of first past the post. So we were successful before we even started. I spent 88, 89, 90 on the road saying this system is rotten and has to be changed. We got MMP, which my enemies ascribe to that campaign. Even my worst enemies do that. But that's a great achievement. We've got a far more open and wider democracy today. We have, since our formation, opposed, for example, the sale of strategic assets. We've pushed for the education budget of this country to be an investment, for health funding to be not a bottom line, but about capital preservation of the resources of this country. We've stood for non-race politics. That's why we don't stand in the Maori seats. And we've pushed causes which have been unpopular, but right now in this campaign, you're hearing all sorts of dog whistles about. For example, the Reserve Bank Act need to be changed, is now being picked up by Labour and the Green Party. Overseas assets, overseas buying, absentee buying of New Zealand houses and property, all of a sudden they're all concerned. When I said that back then, I was accused of being a xenophobic racist.
I can't quite understand if you're happy about these other parties picking up your policies or...
well, limitation is the most sincere form of flattery, but I want people to remember who you can trust to push these issues, because we did when it was unpopular.
Okay, so over these 21 years, your polling support has, fluctuated quite a lot, really. Why, at one stage you got 13% of the vote back in 1996. You've even been up about 30% in the polls. Why is New Zealand First going backwards, perhaps?
We're not going backwards now.
So, yes.
Last time I had this glorious meeting here was in 2011, when all the pollsters, no, I know you guys don't like it, because people don't want to be reminded of the facts. But all the polls were saying that New Zealand First was on 1.5%, and it was a wasted vote. And I told you back then that if you pollsters would get it right, rather than doing what they always do. Now, this is what they do. Come the closing 3 days of the election, they do a poll, and then say, oh, we almost got it right. But in the 7-8 weeks in which you're campaigning, you're up against this stigma of being a wasted vote, because they have falsely misled the country. That's why I ban polls 4 weeks out.
So 4 weeks
the
out,
party's not on the right. The party's not on the fall now. The reality, at the same time in 2011, the polls were saying we were on 1. We were never on 1. The polls are saying we're on 7. We are far higher than 7. I'm convinced of that.
So have you come along today to collect a bet? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not so churlish as to remind people of their,
it's true.
their obligations.
It is true. 3 years ago, Winston Peters came along here. You can watch it on YouTube. It's available as a clip. He said they'd be back in Parliament. I said I didn't think they would be. We had a bet. I think I had to support you if you got back into Parliament, or campaign for you. So I apologise for that. And here is my here's your bet. So this is me giving my part of the bet. Not that side. No, that's a different one. That's for you to hold up. Okay, so...
That's a bit of a backhanded payoff, isn't it?
You've got your pound of flesh. So, now, so New Zealand First. So 7% in the last poll, the last Colmar-Brunton poll, but even that you think is too low, do you think? Do you think you're doing better than 7%?
Well, I can show you by statistical analysis of poll after poll in the last 6 elections, and they have a certain pattern about them. Polls are always far too generous for National. They're about right up above and below for Labour. And I'm talking about the intervening polls all the way to election, the 3 years out and the 3 months out. Where the Greens are concerned, they always inflate the Greens result as opposed to their final outcome. And in our case, they invariably are way below our performance. Now, I would have thought that the political scientists of this country would have had methodologies to correct that outcome, because we're in the business of informing the public in the most factual, professional way we can. And I say, with respect to the pollsters, they're not doing it. And worse than that, overseas, in similar democracies, where the spread is 3% or more, they are so concerned about that, they need to talk about the methodology that's led to this huge difference. Here we have a 12% spread and they arrogantly say, well, we're right and this guy's wrong.
Okay, I mean, you're right. There's some empirical evidence for those differences in election.
Thank you very much.
I agree.
I've been on about it for a long time.
Yes, everyone's coming around to your way of thinking. Yes. Now, you've got a huge profile, and I just see in the last 2 weeks or a few months, you are just everywhere in the media. But where are your colleagues? I'm not quite sure what's happened to... New Zealanders don't seem to know who the other New Zealand First MPs are. What's going on?
Okay, hands up. Who knows the MP for Gisborne? New Plymouth? Whanganui? Nobody's putting their hands up. That's what happens around this country for other parties, so why is ours different? My guys... well, hang on. Be reasonable. MP for Whangarei. Nobody's got their hand up. You see, that's not unusual. My guys and my women are getting stuck in out there in their electorates. The guys in Christchurch, for example, run 3 clinics. They run Christchurch, they run Invercargill, and they run the Dunedin one as well. So we've got a lot of hard work going on, and my job is to, I'm out front and pushing the issues as hard as we can.
Now, you mentioned Whangarei. There's a rumour going around that it's your hometown, isn't it, Whangarei, that you might be standing in that seat?
Well, a journalist wrote that without talking to me.
Yeah.
What's new about that? Nothing, actually.
So it's not happening?
Well, the thing is, no decision has been made this far out.
Are there other seats you're looking at?
Well, frankly, yes.
Okay.
The party, you mean?
Other seats that you're looking to stand in yourself?
The answer is we are looking at seats where we think we can get home.
Okay.
In indirect constituency, yes.
Okay. Would you run against Colin Craig in East Coast Bays, or wouldn't that be a great contest?
Well, it'd be like taking candy off a baby, frankly. With the greatest respect, what does Mr. Craig stand for? Who's backing him? Where's the money coming from? And what are his principles?
So that was 5 questions, I think.
I've answered one of them.
We've got him down here in 2 weeks' time. Are those the questions we need to ask him, do you think?
Look, it's one thing to go and trawl through New Zealand First manifesto policies and try and make them your own. But when you can't answer the 3rd, 4th and 5th question, you'll be exposed for that.
Okay. Yep.
I'm not concerned about Mr. Craig, frankly.
Okay. It looks like we've got a question from the audience. Let's throw it over there and see who's that. Okay, yep.
Well, firstly, Barbara Stewart is a fantastic MP, so I know who she is. She's hard-working. But my question is, whether or not you support a dusty third-term government or a new progressive government, would you fight to repeal the GCSB law?
Well, I'm someone that knows something about the GCSB law and the SIS because I was the Deputy Prime Minister and also Acting Prime Minister and also Minister of Foreign Affairs and have had a lot to do with it. I think that the GCSB acted in a legal way, and I've done my best to have them have that exposed, and and I've not given up. I, for example, have told the public that there's no way that Mr. Key did not know about the Dotcom raid. It is impossible to be in a position where he is in any Western country like ours, and not know what the SIS and the GCSB, of which you're the minister, is doing, as in addition to being aware of what the police were doing, and where the US and the CIA are involved. It's impossible for him not to know, and he's got away with it thus far. And I think that's a condemnation of the New Zealand media that he's thus far been able to say that.
So, Mr. Peters, you go along with Dotcom in saying that there's going to be some revealing information coming out that says the Prime Minister knew about Dotcom before the raid. Is that right?
Yes. So
how do you know about that?
Well, first of all, as a former acting Prime Minister, I know that what Mr. Key says is impossible. That the SIS that I'm the Minister for, the GCSB I'm the Minister for, none of them tell me about this critical event in which the biggest government in the world, the most powerful economy in the world is involved, because that's a sacking offence.
Okay.
Everybody knew but the man who was the boss.
Okay.
Mr. Key, it's impossible.
How damaging is this going to be when Dotcom lets out this evidence, do you think?
Well, it depends what the public of this country think. I've seen times when the force is with a government that the people forgive anything and everything. And then all of a sudden one day they change. But I can recall somewhat a bit similar, but not nearly as critical. It's Roger Douglas, he's the Minister of Finance, everything's going great, the share market's going through the roof, it's all built on speculation in the South Sea bubble, and someone leaks to the media days and days beforehand copies of the budget, which is a very serious offence in our type of country. In fact, in the UK, a minister going into the House of Commons, just said one thing. I think he was asked, any new taxes on tobacco? And he said no. And he was the Chancellor at the time, had to resign because he gave a quarter of an hour advance notice. Anyway, out goes all these budgets. Now, that's a serious offence. What happened to Mr. Douglas? Well, he blamed it on the Secretary. And he got away with it. 3 years later, he would not have. And likewise, Mr. Key, I think, is about hard up against the edge, because the moment it's known, the critical event where he can and had to have known that is in a probative way, and I believe that information does exist. It was in tape form at the GCSB. I believe they've destroyed it.
Okay.
However, there's other lines of communications, and I, for one, have never given up finding that information. Not because I'm anti the government or anti the Prime Minister in that context, but I'm anti someone getting away with bull dust.
Okay. Well, as you know, we're doing this on Twitter as well. So let's see. Liam, is anyone talking about this on?
Yeah, there's been some really, really good chat so far, and obviously the discussion here has been really interesting. Mr. Peters, how important is social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, to not only the New Zealand First campaign, but as a broader part of the election campaign in 2014?
Well, however, it's a bit like pop music. However you look at it, we've got to come to grips with it, because it will be a significant part of, and has been for some time, a significant part of politics. I don't think any political party has got a mortgage on the best way to use it. But make no bones about it, we are certainly doing the best we can to be ready to maximise its capacity.
So how do you use it? How is New Zealand First using digital media?
We're not going to tell you now. I'm not giving over my campaign strategy today.
But we
put some serious background research and effort into how we can best maximise this new utility to the widest possible advantage.
So what about Twitter? I mean, I see that you tweet every once in a while about things. You tweeted about coming here but just before. Do you have to get staff to do that, or do you do it yourself, or how does that work?
The honest truth is that I talk to staff and say, because if I'm doing that all the time, I can't do any work.
Sure.
And I notice a lot of people do that all the time, and they're socially disengaged. But between my staff and myself, we share ideas, and on they go. Okay.
So what about the Internet Party? They are the digital, engaged party. Their deal with
who says so?
Well, they claim to be.
They claim to be, but I tell you that the most digitally aware party in the world is the the Democrat Party under Obama. They use it incredibly. They know something. What does Mr. Dotcom know about campaigning? It's a whole new business.
Well, did you talk about this when you visited him at the Dotcom?
No, I went to see him for one occasion. He wanted me to. He wanted to put his side of the story when I said he should not be in the country, that he's a fraudster. He wanted to put his side of the story. And the other time, I believed that he had, and still has, the critical information that I wanted on a piece of research. And frankly, I'll go to the end of the earth to get information when I'm doing research. And I got near enough to know that I think I might be. He didn't tell me, but I got enough to know where to go.
I don't know what you're talking about. Do you want to elaborate?
Great. It's about the denials of high ministers and ministerial involvement in an illegal raid in our country.
Okay.
And I knew that he had the information. He didn't give it to me, but I got enough to go to other areas. And I don't know if you think I'm just sort of slightly obsessive here, but I find research and investigative work fascinating.
Okay.
So, especially when I think someone's lying.
So how trustworthy is Dotcom?
The fact is that he had serious crimes against his name abroad, and they're far wider. And I think that the consequence for the Mana Party, if they go with him, will be devastatingly bad for them.
So in terms of this idea of Dotcom coming in on the coattails of Hone Harawira, do you have any sort of ethical problem with that?
I have a serious ethical problem when a party that's been around, that starts under a certain name called Mana, representing people who have been here 1,000 years, think that they need somebody who's not a resident and a foreigner to prop them up. I think there's something seriously wrong with that, yes. And with the greatest respect, I do not think that Hone Harawira will be able to hold it together after this weekend. There are far too many spiritual, no, I'm not saying spiritual issues. It is the issue of whether mana means mana Māori or just means mana munching and politics.
Okay, so any idea who the supposed electorate MP that Dotcom's going on about that currently exists that might jump?
No, it is Horne. Horne is the one that he's talking about.
Okay.
And that meeting on Saturday of this week is going to be critical.
So no one from Labour, because Dotcom says it's someone else. Surely there's someone in Labour or National.
Well, to be fair to you, and I concede, you never know with politicians. I mean, let me face it. Far too many of them will double cross the bridge when they come to it.
Okay. Shane Jones?
I don't believe
he's not
Shane.
an electorate MP, actually, is he?
No, it's not. So no, that's his rule.
That's right. Now, let's come back to New Zealand first. When's the party list coming out?
Probably first week in August.
Okay. Do you think we can expect any new names in the top?
Most certainly.
At the top?
Well,
in the top 10?
Well, top 10 most certainly, and many of them in the top 20 will be getting in.
Yeah?
Yes, I'm certain of that.
Okay, so are we going to see some surprises, do you think?
I think it'll surprise some of you, yes. I hope it'll be a pleasant surprise.
Okay. Now, some people want to know why or who might replace you eventually as the leader of New Zealand First. Is that an issue in the party at the moment? Do people
Funny
start
enough,
talking
I
about
go to public meetings all over this country. I'm doing a stack over this weekend, and no one's going to ask me that question. You know why? Because New Zealand First has got a leader, and most parties' problem is they haven't got one.
So will you stand in the next election, 2017?
Look, you're always dependent in elections on what happens at the previous one, whether a whole range of things. But I'm not going anywhere soon, and I'm young enough, I'm fit enough.
Okay.
I'm fit enough.
Yeah.
And I am motivated in this business, seriously motivated.
Okay, so despite the fact you're going to be around for a bit longer yet, what do you think your legacy will be for your whole career, do you think?
Well, the fact is we'll start a political party that will last, and that's a very critical thing, important thing for us. We stood for fundamental principles when others did not find them popular, but we think that the country is going back towards those mainstream things. When I say a greater sense of nationalism, I mean a greater sense of looking after our own people here first.
Okay.
On the critical things like economic GDP sharing, closing the gap between the rich and the poor, because it's a disaster now. And we're the worst country in the OECD in the last 20 years. The gap's getting wider, and we have to take a rain check.
So what's New Zealand First going to do about that inequality gap?
Well, I'll tell you what I did about it last time. I became the foreign minister of this country, but the deal was we're going to take the minimum wage that in all those years, 100 years, it got to $9.
Yeah.
We guaranteed to take it to $12 in 3 years flat, and we did. That's the biggest increase ever in this country's history. And we promised to take it much higher this time round because people cannot get by on the wages we've got constructed now. And the gap between
Labour's saying 15.
I think
much.
15 is too low.
Yeah.
And I think something like $16 or thereabouts is a far more appropriate figure, given what we did between 2005 and 2008. And can we afford it? Of course we can afford it if we structure the economy more soundly than we have. Okay,
you heard it now. $16, is that what we can look forward to?
Well, I said it before the 2005 election and kept my word, and I mean to keep it now.
Now, just on this legacy issue, someone else that's been talking about their political legacy this week is your ex-colleague, Tau Henare. I think he's had some trouble saying what his legacy will be. What do you think it will be?
Well, when he was asked, he couldn't answer, so I don't think I can either.
Yeah. Will you miss him?
Back to New Zealand first.
Will you miss...
Back to my legacy. The fact of the matter is there have been some dramatic changes for which we've never been given credit. But I tell you now, there are far more people from ethnic backgrounds like Maori background who have got into politics because we imaged way back then that we actually could and succeed. Sadly, what they haven't done is done what I've sought to do all my career, is not compete against those in Parliament, but to compete against the best there is anywhere in the world at this job. And unless Maori strive to do that, we'll always be somewhat what you might call pigeonholed politicians.
Okay.
That's the regrettable part about it.
We've got a question at the back.
Now that we'll come back to the secession and when you do step down, and you say that New Zealand First has a leader now, but if you're not sort of talking or discussing to the wider public possibilities, is it going to create a power vacuum like we're seeing in Labour, and is New Zealand First going to be fractured by internal struggles because there's no lead-in, clear-cut, defined sort of someone in the wing?
Well, first of all, who says there's a power vacuum in Labour?
Well,
they've got a leader.
Okay, so
they've got a leader.
The media is certainly portraying. The media is certainly portraying.
That's the point. Thank you very much. That's what they're saying. But how many of them have ever been in a campaign and know what it takes to win? How many of them have ever been out there and realised that there's some fundamental things which are almost unidentifiable, but if their image to the public can turn votes very fast and in a short time in a campaign? So when I have people saying, well, Labour this and Labour that, well, apart from that, that's their problem. I do not conclude that means that there's going to be a certain outcome. In fact, I'd love to be advising the Labour Party now on what they should do.
Well, let's hear it.
But I'm not going to.
Come on.
I'm not going to. But when it comes to New Zealand First, I happen to see, at a younger time in my life, a president that campaigned harder than anybody else in America's history for his replacement. And his name was Reagan, and he went all over the States for a guy called George Bush Sr. And they were very successful. In almost an unelectable situation, he was successful. And one day there'll be a time when I hope to be on the road campaigning for my successor, be it female or male, to make sure that person's going to make it all the way and that the future of the party's safe. But it isn't now, because it's not necessary now.
Okay. So in terms of Labour, you obviously get on very well with Shane Jones. Are there anyone else in Labour that you get on well with or impresses you?
Look, there's some great people in all the political parties. If you could dissect their politics away from them,
yep.
There are some very admirable people in politics, and they are not all that they're painted to be by the cheap shot critic that says they're all the same. They're not the same. So there's people in all the parties that I have certain specific admiration for, some more than most.
Okay. So
I'll give you a guy that I do have not a bad admiration for one reason. His name is Parker, and he's being accused of committing a legal act with respect to a business. And Parker stood down on the basis that the allegations had to be investigated, and Parker had the great good fortune for the Companies Office, which usually destroys documents within 7 years, not to have destroyed a critical document which they found, which said that Parker was telling the truth. Now, I can recall how Parliament and the media treated him at the time, and I admired that his, what I call sort of innate honesty, to the extent that I would think he's one of the people that I could more trust than most.
Okay.
But the sad thing was, I never saw one journalist calling for his resignation say, look, Mr. Parker, we're sorry. That's a bit shameful, isn't it?
Okay. Now, so Shane Jones, he's been having a go at the Greens lately, saying they're not fit for government. What do you think? Is Shane right?
Well, that's it for the public to decide. All I'm saying is that a lot of the speculation as to what is going to happen in 2014, I believe it will be demonstrated to be palpably wrong, and it can be demonstrated now for very sound reasons.
Well, so Shane Jones doesn't seem to like the Greens. Yourself? Someone told me that you hate the Greens. What's that about?
Yeah, a journalist said that. Never bothered to make a phone call or talk to me.
Yeah. So you do like the Greens?
No, there's something shady and shabby happening in our political life and our commentariat. The idea that you can actually write that without talking to the person about whom you're writing, I think is a disgrace. At least the person should be able to say, well, you're not correct, I don't think that way. But no, you have all manner of people now that are saying all manner of things which verge, they shade into almost being defamatory, particularly if you care about your relationships with other political parties and you're left with the outcome. I don't hate the Greens. Why wouldn't I hate the Greens? Why would I? I mean, I think good, sound environmentalism is great economics. That's why I'm a great admirer of Scandinavian countries, because they've delivered what the Greens only talk about here. And over in Scandinavia, though, they're far more practical than the people here. For example, take the Greens. They say, we need to use solar power, which is wonderful, fantastic, it's renewable and everything else. But to use solar power, you've got to believe in extraction of minerals to develop the technology to do that. Then they say we don't want any extraction. So that's where I think they need to learn from the leading countries like Norway and like Sweden about how this is done. But I don't hate the Greens, and I said long before MMP that a voice for the environment was needed in Parliament.
So
I hope that the voice is a practical voice.
So in your view, have they improved in recent years? Because you used to dismiss them a bit more, I think. So have they become a bit more rational in your view?
Well, usually I come to these interviews to talk about a thing called New Zealand First and exciting possibilities, but I end up, like in all interviews, talking about every other party but mine.
People are interested in knowing your views on things throughout politics.
If the media were, they don't write about it.
Okay. Well, I mean, let's talk about what the Labour have, they've rebuffed the Greens, saying we won't have these pre-election coalitions. They had to?
Well, of course they had to.
You must be pleased about that.
Well, I didn't think for a moment that such a... well, first of all, here comes a party called the Greens that says it's making a genuine offer, months out from the election, for Labour to give up constituency seats where they run the Green Party vote only. Yeah. Now, what sort of offer is that? I mean, it's a deliberate, calculated attempt to destabilise a party that's got more votes than them.
Do you think the Greens would be destabilising in government? Are they a stable force?
Well, no, let's deal with what they've just done.
Okay.
So the Labour Party says, no, we can't have that. And if they didn't, I would have thought the Labour Party was in danger of not existing over a period of time if they took that path. So clearly the Labour Party sensibly said no, because we're all after getting our own market share in the campaign, and you'll have to graft out your share like everybody else.
So some people have seen it as a kind of hostile, aggressive act towards New Zealand First because they're trying to cut you out of the deal. Is that how you see it?
Well, I wouldn't be so unkind. But I think it's a very bad strategy if that was an attempt, because in this election, I'll guarantee you we get more votes in the Greens, and considerably more, for lots of reasons.
Okay. What's happening on Twitter, Liam?
Yeah, it's really interesting so far. And the response to your losing of the bet and vote New Zealand First, I think there might be a draft, get Bryce onto the New Zealand First party list for the 2014 general election. Yeah. There's a question about MMP and proportional politics, and I think there's a lot being made about National, maybe the biggest party in the polls, but Labour and Greens can almost get to their level. Does MMP mean now that the largest polling party, or the party who receives the most party votes, doesn't necessarily get to form the government?
Well, the first past the post system didn't mean that either. The answer is no to both. No, it doesn't mean that. And it never meant it under first past the post. You can recall elections where Labour got more votes across the country, but National still won.
Maybe it's better in terms of parties with the most seats, because obviously in first past the post, the party that got the most seats formed the government or the majority. So in MMP, would it be the biggest party in terms of seats in the House that would have, say, a moral mandate to govern first?
Look, I know the motivation of the question, but the question is actually begging the public to accept that minority government it should be allowed. Now, minority government is not allowed in this country. You have minority governments, but not minority without consent. So if a party is there with 40% of the vote and it's in government, it's there with the consent of other parties allowing them to do that. In that sense, it is still 50% plus. Because when it comes to a vote, they'll need 50% plus. It is still majority government in that context. But those who say that usually are National Party supporters, hoping that if they've lost all their friends and burned them all off,
well, that's true. I mean,
they can survive.
John Key keeps talking about this moral mandate. Do you agree with this idea?
Well, it's rather interesting. He's talking about morals and a mandate at the same time. But no, with the greatest respect, I mean, John Key, a lot of people like him, and he's got a lot of character and everything else, and he's a good old boy and holds a beer and has a barbecue and what have you. But actually, so much of his behaviour is the behaviour of Wall Street. And he's become New Zealand's #1 salesman, selling this country out on the energy assets and things like that. Now saying, and overnight you're going to find out how spurious this is, but I can't say it now because it was leaked to me by a media outlet. But saying, for example, that my protest about asset sales and house sales to foreigners is silly, he says. Really? Well, you see how this new techno campaign using the capacity of new technology works when people say that sort of thing in 2014. And so we're seriously looking forward to it. Okay, so do you have anything in common with John Key? Well, I don't dye my hair. If I drink a beer, I want to drink it out of a glass because that's what every brewer tells me where the taste is. It's not on the neck of the bottle. I know it's very fashionable in New Zealand, of course. Yes, I've got a lot of things in common with the key, but I was a member of the National Party when it had principles, when it stood for something, when its name meant what it said.
Sure.
And now it's an international global party, and I'm glad I'm not there.
Now, you more than anyone else in Parliament probably knew and understood Rob Muldoon the best. What would he say if he was around about the National Party today? What do you think?
I think Muldoon he'd be turning in his grave. Well, I don't think he wouldn't understand it, because Muldoon had two periods as Minister of Finance. And the first time he was a very responsible Minister of Finance, and the second time he got whacked with the second oil crisis and things went upside down. And I think Muldoon would prefer to maybe remember the first time he was there. But Muldoon was seriously someone who believed in the national interest, like Norman Kirk. There wasn't a great, back then, divide between what Labour and National thought on import substitution, on Buy New Zealand, on building your own railways and what have you. They all supported the railway workshops down here and all over the country. They were far more similar. This new breed in Parliament, sadly on the National Party side and for a while temporary on Labour's side, seemed to have no moral or philosophical compass.
Okay, wow. We've got another question in the audience, I think.
Yeah, I was just wanting to ask, speaking of principles and national and things like that, do you think morally Judith Collins should come fully clean on her trip to China before the election campaign kicks in fully?
I think that Judith Collins was meeting people in circumstances where if it was known, she would have to resign because of a conflict of interest. In fact, I'm prepared to say to you right now, she met people where the moment the name comes out, she will be a goner, that she acted improperly, that there was a serious conflict of interest, and that she knew in advance of that travelling to China, that what the purpose of that meeting was. Now, if Judith doesn't like it, she can sue me. But she won't sue me, I know. She saw that senior border agency guy, because that border agency guy could give transitional entry preferment to Harawira, the product that her husband's company was involved in. That was said by the other female in that organisation 5 weeks out before Judith Collins went. And she can duck and dive as much as she likes, but John Key is being absolutely spuriously extreme when he says he's got standards and he allows that sort of thing to happen. Now, I'm quite astonished that someone who's a senior in the Law Society at a certain level, much less higher than she actually claims she was, but I'm still shocked that she could actually got caught this way. But she's conflicted, seriously, and she can bang on and say it was a private dinner. It was not. She used taxpayers' money to get there, and Mr. Key has the effrontery, just like in the case of Peter Dunn, of not to ask the question, what was this guy's name? In Dunn's case, did you leak the document? He says he hasn't asked him. Or in John Banks' case, I won't read the police report. That's 3 in a row. Anyway, the more New Zealanders know about, the clearer the vote will be in 2014.
So regardless of how the vote goes and what happens after the election, philosophically, which of Labour and National do you see New Zealand First most ideologically aligned with?
Look, it's extraordinarily complex politics today, because you know Labour's track record, circa 84.
Yep.
They came in, they turned the country upside down, they threw out their manifesto, brought in the most neoliberal policies we've ever seen, and devastated people's lives in their hundreds of thousands. 80% of the people who lost jobs in the forestry, New Zealand Forestry, were Maori. They've never put those lives back together again. And to be fair to Labour, they've reneged on that and come back. And then Labour sometimes, though, has social policies where a certain group say, I don't care what the country thinks, I think this, and you can wear it. When I would much prefer it to be a referendum. On the National Party side, there are certain aspects of the policy that I like, excepting they have become the puppets of big money and overseas business and banking and financial interests. Just one economic example. This province is based on exporting. Look at the currency, it's going to make 90 cents US. It's 87 now. Incidentally, who said that first? That it was going to make 90? Well, yours truly did, because I'm absolutely alarmed at the time at what it meant to export New Zealand. But if you look at Dunedin's economic condition, where 50% of the people are actually going nowhere, it's because the monetary policy is run for downtown Queen Street and not for the export provinces of New Zealand. Southland, 3% of the population, 80 to 90% of the exports, and look where they are on the earnings dichotomy of this country. So unless people get a hang on things, in the case of the National Party, it's very difficult to work with them, as it is with others as well.
So would you see New Zealand First in the centre of the political spectrum and Labour off to the left and National off to the right?
There's only one centre party in this country, it's called New Zealand First. No. The rest say it when it comes to the election. They start a dog whistle. They're all saying now, we're concerned about foreigners buying houses. Years ago, all the way to last year, they were saying, that guy's a racist, he's xenophobic. Now we're concerned about the Reserve Bank Act. Why? Because the dollar's heading towards 90. Where were they when it was headed towards 80? Didn't say anything about it. So basically, it's very difficult in this current climate, and we are prepared to say that of the options we've got, one is sitting on the cross benches and staying where we are.
That could make you very powerful.
No, it doesn't make you very powerful because, look, there's nothing, the great part and role of being in your job or being a sports person or being in politics is to get to play the game on the paddock. But in being an opposition member, it's awfully frustrating because you see people up there and you think, that guy can't even kick the ball 30 yards. I can kick it 60, right? As an analogy. So, no, it's very frustrating, but that's the price one might have to pay. And in fact, in 2011, in a speech on the 5th of October, I said we're going with no one because I could see the gap between us was just too big.
Right.
I hope it's not the case this time, but we're prepared to, if we have to forego.
Do you think it's potentially possible that you might come out before the election with that same statement, depending on what policy is released in the next 5 months?
I'm glad you said that because you see, you ask questions now to say what you're going to do, yet we've got 5 months to go with all sorts of policies yet to be announced on which we all want to make judgments, including you, the voter, and yet we're asked to make the judgment now.
Sure.
We can't.
But maybe in 5 months' time, before the polling day.
Well, the last time we did it, for the first time.
So that could happen again, that you might do the same?
Yeah, it may happen again, yes.
Yeah.
But wouldn't, big mistake to tie yourself to something before you've got to see all the circumstances. In fact, it's very bad policy in your life, or sport, or with everything you do, to make any decision before you've got all the facts.
But from voters' point of view, don't they want to know the maximum amount of information?
No, they don't.
Want to know,
I'm so
will
pleased.
Peters go with Labour, National?
I'm so pleased you said that because the voters don't want to hear that. Now, that's what the commentariats say. They keep on saying, I hear political scientists. In fact, when one of your colleagues was saying it last week, oh, this is dreadful, he won't say. Look, the latest and only known survey on this issue recently is where it says that a serious majority of people don't like sordid pre-election deals, and in fact 35% of the National Party voters don't like it either, and we agree.
Okay, we've got a question from Joe in the audience.
You talked about the minimum wage before, and that's obviously an issue that's concerned you, but what about the employment legislation itself, which, obviously we saw that you would have seen the impact of the Employment Contracts Act back in the early 90s. So what do you propose to do about that situation, our low-wage economy?
Well, the number one thing to do with the low-wage economy is you make the minimum wage what it should be. At the same time, you've got to make fundamentally possible for productive export businesses to grow the wealth of New Zealand. So we've got more money coming back to this country. Where we're never going to go anywhere. We're having this isolated discussion in Parliament whilst we've got a huge deficit of exports over imports. Imports are costing so much more. All that is debt. And there's not rocket science. That needs to be handled. But you cannot do it in isolation. You need to statutorily change the minimum wage. Second thing is, on the question of industrial relations, which I believe what your question is, the government should not be siding with either side. The government should be neutral as a fair arbiter in the interests of the nation's economy, not favouring the boss or the worker. That's what a sound economy would do, and a sound strategy would do, and more importantly, it has this advantage. We began with industrial relations way back in 1908. It lasted for decades and decades and decades. What we got now happens like this. In comes National, down goes the law. In comes Labour, down goes the law. It is not sustainable, it's not permanent, but it would be if the government took a neutral position, favouring neither side, but said we want a fair outcome in the interests of A, the economy and the participants. And it's not ideological. It was what used to motivate parties and has motivated parties in other countries such as Germany and indeed, in fact, Australia.
Now, you've given some political journalists a hard time today. I just wondered if are any journalists doing a decent job of covering politics in your view at the moment?
A lot are, and I've got, contrary to what you think, I've got great admiration for a lot of journalists, but it's not their fault in particular. They're being starved of resources and time to do the best job they can. And it's an awful feature of our society. There was a time when investigative journalism in this country was big and real. Now they're being so choked that it doesn't exist in the way it should do, or if people are doing it, it's so exceptional as to be a one-off project.
So do you think that the media is too focused on personalities and trivial things, or is that just the way of the world?
No, I think it's the fact that we condone cross-media ownership by any outfit from far overseas who've got no interest, basically, in the long-term economy or character and shape of our society. We should never allow that to happen. I mean, if Murdoch had to become an American to buy into America, how did he come and buy in here?
So what's your policy on this?
Well, I'm against it. I'm for New Zealand ownership. I'm for the New Zealand ownership of the New Zealand media.
So you'd ban overseas...
I've been a bit of a lonely voice, but I can recall saying that in 1988.
Yeah, and it's still your...
No, I made a
line?
speech to the press gallery and to this press conference, the press people of this country in 1988 saying, you've got a disaster coming here by allowing this cross-media ownership and worst of all, it's going to choke investigative journalism. And it did. So
what, you kick out the owners of the media, big media in New Zealand, or what?
You know, people forget, a great speech, somebody should get a chance, look in Hansard, find Hollyoak's speech, when a guy called Murdoch, coming out of Adelaide, owning one newspaper, tried to buy the Dominion newspaper in Wellington, and Hollyoak squashed him. And he made a wonderful speech. I know a lot of you probably don't like Hollyoak or the National Party, but he was a very, very great leader. And in that speech, you'll see why he thought it was important not to allow it to happen. Nothing's changed.
Okay, what's happening on Twitter, Liam?
Yeah, there's one question, and let's pretend for the moment we're September 21st, day after the election, and it looks like Labour, Greens, New Zealand First could form a government, but it requires a Green Party member to be a cabinet minister. Could you support that government?
Who asked that question? Look, I'll make this prediction, and I'm sure it's occurred to some of you. This is Otago University. This is the Pol Science Department. Have it not occurred to you that Labour and the Greens can't get up in this campaign?
So
the day some of you admit that, the day you might help there be a change in New Zealand.
So there won't be a Labour Greens government after
You're
this
political
election.
scientists, you do the maths.
Yeah, but let's start talking about some predictions.
No, the politics is about mathematics in the end. In all respects, it's about the numbers.
So Labour and the Greens can't win.
Well, we all know that.
Yeah.
So why have we got this sort of constant projection of the election being about those choices? They are most certainly not.
Would it bother you having some of these Green MPs, having Minister Russell Norman as looking after finance, or Minister?
Look, if I'm working for Fisher and Paykel, I don't spend all my day talking about Simpson washing machines. I'm working for New Zealand First, and my job is to project this party and its policies into a resounding third place, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Okay. Nonetheless, we've got a couple of minutes left. I just wondered if you throw some predictions out there, because you proved pretty well to do it in 2011. What's going to happen with the Conservatives? Are they going to get a few percent?
The National Party might make some unprincipled arrangement, but it won't be in East Coast Bays unless they can give Murray an overseas post.
I'm sure they could.
A couple of $1 million to go with it. Murray's not going to move for just one thing.
Yeah.
So that's the problem they've got.
So you think the East Coast Bays
thing
won't happen?
I don't think it's going to happen, because Murray's not going to be tipped out like that. The fact is, I think the polls are going to decline for National as the heat of the campaign goes on. The question is whether...
How far down will they go, do you think?
They could go down to 42.
Yeah.
Anything like that. Well, 42 would be a very high vote for them. I think historically...
Labour's currently on, 32? Do you think they can do better than that in the end?
Well, they're going to have to. They're going to have to, won't they, to make it a contest. But, if they get themselves to 35, 37, then it's a whole new ball game in terms of the fascinating interest of this campaign.
Yeah, but we can still have Labour getting 32, the Greens getting 12, New Zealand having 5%. That's well over 50%.
Well, you can add up, but you've got the wrong numbers in the wrong place.
Oh, well, tell us where they'll be. By all means.
I've told you. I've said
Okay.
that I'm saying to you that I'll renew my bet that we come in third in this campaign.
Okay.
If we're on 7,
You'll be third.
Look, if we could get to where we got last time without any resources and totally marginalised, Cinderellaised and shut out with no resources, and we're on 7 now, when the equivalent time last campaign we were on 1, what we've got to face and survive is character assassination attempts against the party and its members, and we're going to be home and hosed.
Right, okay. The Murray Party, how many seats will they hold, do you think?
They will get one, because the National Party will go out and put all sorts of money into trying to save them. I know that. They'll go out, and they've already setting about to raise a fund of 80,000 for Tururu Flavel. They're going to pass legislation in urgency in July. That is, all July will be about urgency, and they're going to do their best to pass legislation to try and make the Labour Party look good, Murray Party look good. They won't be able to save them, though.
So they'll get no seats?
They may get one seat.
They might get Wairiki?
That's it, yes.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Winston Peters. This has been
very much.
Very interesting. So thanks everyone for coming, and tune in next week. 2 weeks' time, we've got Colin Craig. So thanks.
No, forget about that. Just go the next week.